Hey folks, it's Warren Wilson with Police One. I have a special guest to go with my shotgun article here. This is Eric with a K, Gelhaus, who is the editor of American Cop and got a little experience with a shotgun too, knows a little bit about it. Why don't you tell us something about that, Eric?
Hey, Warren, first off, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you this evening. Did 29 years full time law enforcement before I retired as a patrol sergeant. That was with the sheriff's office up in the north end of the San Francisco Bay Area. When I came on, we were issued wheel guns, and the shotgun was the long gun in the car. It was a few years before I got rifles. Not too long out of the academy, I kind of realized that taking a shotgun out in certain circumstances was a whole lot better than having just a handgun alone. So I started hitting up training because I knew I didn't know what I didn't know about the shotgun. And I was fortunate being out in California that I was able to get classes with LA Sheriff's Department Special Enforcement Bureau, then got down to Gunsight, the FBI instructor school. Later on, Louis Auerbach, Scotty Reeds, had already had Bill Jeans, took classes from Rob and Matt Hott along the way. Started teaching at Gunsight in 2000, with shotgun being one of the things in my portfolio. Um, Back at the department, one of the first projects I got when I became a firearms instructor was working up a proposal that became policy to initially allow guys to carry their own shotguns if they wanted to, because we were issuing 870s that came in a variety of flavors in terms of sights. Then that turned into everybody being issued their own 14-inch gun with ghost ring sights, side saddle, and slings later on. Um, then with my company in retirement, I started my company, Cougar Mountain Solutions, and shotgun is one of the things that's heavy that I teach. So that's kind of a wave top sketch of the background.
So one thing that I actually didn't know about you, we've known each other for several years now and done some podcasts and stuff together. One thing I didn't know until somewhat recently was you've been a gun sight instructor since
Started there in 2000.
so in 2000, which was a while ago, and that is a place that the shotgun you can learn the shotgun at gun
Yeah,
sight.
I kind of refer to it as West Coast shotgun. There was a heavy culture of using the shotgun in what I now term proactive fashion, not reactive, but very proactive on the West Coast. I had a chance early on to go down to a shooting and tactics package at LAPD, and while we weren't doing shotguns per se, I got to see how they treated it. Patrol, Metropolitan Division, their special investigation section, and then parts of their full-time SWAT team at the time was real heavy with the shotgun.
And we were both invited by Mossberg to go to gun
Mm-hmm.
sight in October. Went to their class, and I'll try to link that somewhere in the article there, where you can see the at the very beginning of the video, the old guy you see doing the weird left-handed stuff with the shotgun. That's dude.
So I've been shooting, come down, over the top, grab it, point in, push, and come back up.
But in seriousness, yeah, really squared away guy. And I was thinking, man, I got so many guys who are good at shotgun, but uh, you're the one I was thinking this would be good for him. Be good to have Eric on for this. And so let's talk about first, though, what the shotgun isn't. So we were talking offline, and we've talked several times about these things. But what isn't the shotgun? What about? I'll give you an example. I'll start with a story. I told him it wasn't going to be scripted, so we'll do it this way. There's a motorcycle gang in town, which doesn't happen very often in the OOs. That means the early 2000s, in case you didn't know. And those guys had run this lady off the road and were trying to beat her up at a gas station. And so we get called. I didn't know there was an outlaw motorcycle gang in town. So I found out by showing up and seeing all these motorcycle gang guys, and there was a couple of them there. So we arrested those two guys. And then all of a sudden, here comes a whole bunch of more of them, just kind of meandering into the parking lot, revving their engines like a movie. I was by myself, didn't have any backup. Nobody was coming. And I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get my shotgun out of the trunk, and I'll thwack thwack. Watch those guys wet themselves and run away. You know what they actually did? They laughed at me. They laughed at me. I was heartbroken. Why didn't somebody tell me thwack thwack's not a real thing before that? So that's one thing it's not.
Now, there's a bunch of urban mythology around it, and that is that just working the action on it's going to scare people away. What scares people away is them understanding that you know when you can and can't use it, and that when it falls into the can category, that you've got the willingness to do it. Um, and to define willingness, go grab the scene between John Wayne and Ron Howard in The Shootist when
Yes,
they're discussing it.
absolutely, absolutely.
The shotgun's not a sniper rifle. Don't try to make it into one, right? It does certain things very well, but it's also not. It's a tool you have to aim. You can't just throw it up, press the trigger, and knock down everything within a room, right? Like you have to understand the capabilities and limitations of the weapon. What it absolutely is a thinking person's platform, right? Like if you can think about what you have in your hand and what the problem is, shotgun's probably a really good tool.
And there's a lot of that about the aiming thing. A lot of people will. I've had folks come to me, including with talking about revolver 410 shotguns, which make me crazy. That this has a better spread, and I said, well, first of all, nothing about spread is good, right? What is a good pattern?
I want to
How would you
keep
define that?
I want to keep something somewhere between a fist and either the down zero of an IDPA target or the left and right of a USPSA A zone, 15, 20 yards.
And we
Um,
we don't want it hitting everything else, right? We want it
well, you
hitting
got to
what
be
we're
aware of it.
aiming at.
There's a time where you may have a 40-yard shot, but you have a background that is accepting of a couple pellets escaping the target, right?
There you go.
And in that case, you can launch the shot. But again, this is a thinking process, right? There's other times going to be like, hey, I'm at 15 yards and I need to go to a solid projectile because even though I'm really comfortable with the pattern on this gun, right, it's not where it needs to be to solve this problem. So you got to aim the thing, right? There's going to be a recoil push. Okay. It's not going to pick you up and launch you off your feet because if it did that, it would pick up and launch the dude you're shooting with it or dudette off their feet. And that doesn't happen either. Right. So learn to manage the recoil, be able to think about what you're seeing problem wise, be able to think about which one of your loads will give you the ability to solve it or how you can solve it with the load you have in the gun.
Well, there's a couple more myths right there. The first one I think that's really important is that shotguns recoil too much to be used effectively. That's not true, is it? With the proper technique.
Now, good friend of mine just taught a class. He had a student in there that I've had in a class before. If she is 5'1", that is generous. And quite frankly, if she breaks 110, that's generous. He had her running a 20 gauge extremely well once he got her down on the technique. Right.
And we had a little mouse cop just recently, and she chose to go with the rifle because
Mm-hmm.
it's easier and it takes a lot of dedication. But you can absolutely run a shotgun
Mm-hmm.
no matter if you get, and granted, you may need to work on shorter stocks and whatever like that. But as far as the recoil goes, anybody can pretty much handle it, can't they?
Yeah. And we're at an age right now where you can get the accessories you need to make the gun fit someone. Right. And if it's a choice between a 12 gauge shotgun that someone can't manage or a 20 gauge shotgun with slightly less payload that they can keep on target, keep in the fight, get them a 20 gauge. I mean, we're in an era where we've got access to Word, laptops, and everything else. We can type out the justifications for this and hopefully convince the people above us to sign off on it to give the folks we're responsible for, whether we're supervising or teaching them or working with them, the equipment they need to solve the problem.
And that's another good point. Another good point. We're in a modern age, but there's nothing there's nothing really retroactive about a shotgun. It works just as good now as it always did. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, the ammo is even better. It's crazy better.
Yeah. I think the
And
stuff we have now, let me back up. When we got the first reduced recoil tactical load in the mid 90s, the old, what was the H132 load from
yep,
Federal, that with a Vang barrel was awesome. And then this dude in the same area of the country I'm in now, Billings, came out with his loads, which is what evolved into the flight control and the Hornady Versatite. When he started turning that stuff out in the early OOs, right, it was like, oh, we didn't know how good this was. And Federal and Hornady have really refined their stuff. I think the patents died on or has expired on it. So now I think you're going to see even more evolution, right? And we can talk about that stuff as we go, but learn the limitations of the gun, which you're only going to get to by shooting it, by actually understand shooting it, shooting what you have, and then learn how to apply it.
So those are some of the kind of the myths that we hear about things. Those things that the shotgun's not. Um, and we talked a little bit offline about, Tom Gibbons has this thing about J-frames. J-frame revolvers are very effective, very good defensive guns, but they're not beginner guns,
Right.
and they're expert guns. They're great in an expert's hands, not so much in a beginner's hands, even though we tend to do that. Well, in training, we have our pistol side, and then you'll generally see in law enforcement, especially, you'll see, well, here's a day of shotgun and 3 days of rifle. And
Right.
that always made perfect sense to me until I started teaching it. And then I realized a few years ago, this doesn't make a lot of sense because those folks are really struggling with the shotgun, but they're not struggling with the rifle. I wonder
Right.
why.
When I came on was hired, we issued revolvers and shotguns. Those were manually operated, manually loaded, manually unloaded firearms. Right. So you put each one of the shells in, you closed the action on it, you cycled the action manually to make the gun fire, and you manually opened the action, unloaded everything. And then we got to semi-auto pistols, put the box in, pull the thing, let it slide forward, press the trigger until the slidey thing locks back. Right. And then we threw patrol rifles into the mix. But when we threw patrol rifles in the mix, it was almost like this is something super special. No, it's just different. Right. And we'd had rifles before, and we just passed the anniversary of those two cop killers, murderers, car thieves from Texas, where Frank Hamer, Manny Galt, and others, Sheriff Jared, smited them quite nicely down in Louisiana, right? There were a lot of rifles in that event. So rifles weren't new to law enforcement. They'd just been kind of gone for a while. So the semi-auto pistol and the semi-auto rifle make perfect sense, right? Because we don't have folks that grew up with manually operated firearms like it was when I came in, went to the academy. Um, you can teach folks to run a pump gun very effectively, but you've got to take the time to teach them how to do it because there's some issues there, and there's ways to mitigate recoil and let them get shots off really quickly. Rob and Matt Hott have done a phenomenal job with their push pull. Coming off the West Coast, I was really comfortable with pull, so I'm pulling that stock back into the pocket of the shoulder with both hands, whether it's a pump gun or a semi-auto, and I don't have a problem managing recoil and getting follow-on shots off. So now where we're at is everybody understands semi-auto pistols, semi-auto rifles, but the shotgun's a bit of an anathema to folks. We need to treat the shotgun the way we first treated patrol rifles when we got them, right? Actually spend the time teaching people how to use them, teach them the capabilities and limitations of the gun. Let them know when it's okay to go, I can take this shot because I know what my background is, or I can't take this shot and I need to do something different, be that movement, changing angles, right? Or potentially changing loads. But we got to spend the time teaching people how to use it. I think it was Louis Auerbach who first, at least I first heard say it's a thinking man's weapon. All right. And if you can think your way through the problem with that gun in your hand and the limitations, it can do some incredibly amazing stuff. I've gotten to shoot a number of vehicles over the years. What I can do to intermediate cover with a 12 gauge slug, be it true ball from Federal or even better, a Brennica slug, right, is a lot more effective than what I can do with rifle fire in some cases. Not all of them, but some. Right. If I have to start dealing with window glass, that slug, especially if it's got sharp shoulders on it, will do a better job punching through that window glass, getting inside than some rifle rounds will,
And
depending
have
on.
more oomph once it gets
Yes.
inside too, because
Yes.
we've seen punching through car doors with a rifle when it gets through, like a 223, 5.56, when it gets through, there's not a lot left
No.
to do what you need to do. But with a shotgun slug, there's still a lot of oomph there.
There's still a whole lot of mass there. That's an ounce, ounce and an eighth of lead, right? And if you're running Brennicas, it's a very hard lead. If you're running the true ball slugs, just as one example, right? That thing's designed to expand to the interior dimensions of the barrel, and then stay true all the way down until it hits something, and then turn around on itself. So,
So when it comes down to it, we're seeing less and less folks use OC and
mhm,
shotgun are both dying, and they're both incredible tools that they just don't want to see go away.
right,
We've seen folks in videos, and there wasn't a lot of shooting videos going on when shotguns were really in their heyday. You didn't really get a lot of the body cam and
Yeah.
badge cam and even dash cam. You didn't get a lot of those. There's some out there, and when you see double out buck at a normal range, you don't see a lot of folks getting back up or not going down immediately. But with a rifle, we've seen that.
Yeah.
There was just one. There was a contact wound. The guy got shot in the side by the cop while he was laying down, and it didn't even slow him down.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it's not effective, but that shotgun sure hell is.
And one of the points I wanted to make about the shotgun is the media and certain segments of the public are very concerned about round counts and shootings now. Oh, the cop shot him too many times. Okay. I pressed the trigger on 2 shells of flight controller Versatite. That's 16 pellets going down range, but I only pressed the trigger twice. Okay. And when I'm working within the confines of what that gun excels at, I could end a fight with one, maybe 2 presses of the trigger versus 5 to 10 out of some other platforms. Right. It's a very definitive ending. I think about 2 shotgun shootings my office had where I was able to talk in depth with the guys who pressed the trigger on him. And one was a slug to the side of the face, ended it immediately. The other was a shot at distance, just about at kind of the limitation of double aught buck. One shot fired. Back then it was a 12 pellet magnum load. Ugh. But the bad guy did a slow pirouette into the ground, and that was the end of that problem. Right. It wasn't a magazine dump. It wasn't a cylinder dump. Right. These people were down on the ground very quickly. Fight's over with.
And we've got a couple of mutual friends who have investigated several shootings and been involved in several officer involved shootings who tell us the same exact thing. And nobody I know that is in the know that has actual real world experience will tell you that buckshot and slugs don't work exceptionally well
Yeah.
in real life. They just do. So, what is the solution? Because I fear we're going to end up losing the shotgun. And at one point, I'd have been on board with saying, well, rifle's good enough until I kind of started hanging out with some of you guys
Yeah.
and started really figuring out, man, we can't get rid of that. We need that. There's a lot of times when you can't get a rifle into a car, can't get a rifle around into a house when you need to, or into some beyond some barrier where even buckshot works pretty darn good, especially at close range at getting into places.
So there needs to be competently presented training, right? And I'll toot my own horn for a second, but I can think of several guys out there in addition to myself that understand the gun well enough to be teaching either application classes or instructor development classes. Administrators need to see what's actually being done with those guns. Don't rely on some of the internet mythology, right? And you and I have had the conversation about how admin can perceive things right from different perspectives, and it's no different than me as a patrol sergeant. Well, when I was a patrol sergeant, misperceiving things from my point of view. But see what the actual limitations and capabilities of the gun are. Right. Understand that it doesn't just throw pellets out everywhere willy nilly. Right. That there is patterning and do that. Then look at decent guns. Right. Not the stuff that we've had bouncing around patrol cars for the last 30 plus years. Look at good quality guns. Look at what's on the market right now. I was not a fan of semi-autos for years, but I will tell you, Beretta and Mossberg have radically changed how I view the semi-auto and proactive and reactive shotgun use. I mean, now a huge fan of semi-auto shotguns. Take a look at the ammunitions out there, right? The different loads. And if you go to me in the current environment, you go with a quality semi-auto shotgun with either Hornady Versatite or Federal Flight Control. And for me, I put it in that order, not the other way around. With optics and a light on it and a way to carry additional ammo, you have got a very effective tool for solving problems within a known envelope. Right now, if you tell me I'm going to an active shooter at a mall, I'm probably going to grab a patrol rifle. If you tell me I've got to deal with a vehicle-based problem, or we're doing a high-risk search inside a structure, I may very well grab that shotgun instead because of its capabilities. Then train your people and establish a shotgun cadre like we had in the early days of patrol rifle in a lot of places, especially those of us that adopted them in the early and mid 90s, where you had a crew of people who self-selected. They wanted to be around a patrol rifle. They wanted to run those things. So they were willing to go through the extra training, the extra range calls, get those folks doing the same thing with the shotgun. right? And then put them out on the street and pay attention to what's going on.
So one of the things we always hear about shotgun is versatility. Now, I've never been a big fan of using less lethal in a shotgun, even if it's painted orange, because if I've got shotgun slugs and buckshot in the car or anywhere near that thing, you know what's going to happen. It's going to end up in there. But it's still a very versatile platform, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. I can load that gun with double out buck and work out to 20, 25 yards if I understand the pattern in the barrel very effectively. I can work beyond that depending on the backstop, right? And how I can process that. Likewise, if I have a threat that's behind cover, or a threat that is out of distance, or one that's a high percentage shot that requires a single projectile, I can go to a slug, a 1 ounce slug, and work that problem that way. For years, in a whole lot of places, law enforcement and a lot of the shooting schools, the select slug drill was worked. Know how to do it, know how to be able to do the manipulations that go with it. But I spent several years trying to hunt down events where the select slug drill was done to completion. I don't mean just getting a slug into the chamber. I mean actually firing that slug once it was there. I found two. One happened in Tennessee several years before. It was done like textbook. The guys that found it for me were like, oh yeah, this was done step A, step B, step C. There was another very recent one at an extremely large West Coast sheriff's office where it was a day shift patrol response. Deputy realized he needed a slug because the bad guy was wearing armor. And unfortunately, he did it by completely unloading the shotgun manually, putting a couple of slugs in the gun and then shooting the bad guy. It was not a select slug drill. It was an unload the gun, put slugs back in the gun thing. Like you, I'm not a fan of less lethal and 12 gauge, right? And aside from the concerns about somebody mistakenly loading live rounds into a less lethal gun, one of the events my last year on the job before I retired was with a local agency, and I watched one of their dog handlers who's very competent put 4 rounds of 12 gauge less lethal, and this specifically was like a rubber slug, into a guy at about patrol car and a half length with zero effect. And I was loading a 40 millimeter at their request to engage the guy with a 40, and I fired several 40 rounds into him before we finally got him down on the ground.
Yeah,
So just
those less lethal, on top of being a little spooky to me,
yeah,
they just don't work that great. I mean, we just have to admit that's just not what we're doing with it. So when we're talking about versatility of a shotgun's good for lethal force.
yes,
And a lot of folks will talk about versatility, and they're not talking about being able to do different things with it, like being capable of getting through barriers, of being
mm-hmm.
really devastating, and only having to do 1 or 2 rounds to actually stop somebody. They're talking about, well, I can use birdshot in my house for home defense, right?
No.
No.
So birdshot's fine if you want to get people to work on functioning the gun, working the controls, working the mechanics of keeping the gun up and running, and not having a recoil pulse that may necessarily be as stout as double aught buck and definitely not as stout as slug. However, it is not intended as a defensive load. Don't try to shoot people with birdshot. Period. Don't. If you want, again, if you want to use it for teaching manipulations and mechanics, rock on. I'm in favor of that all day long, but not for how to fight with a gun, not for the thinking part of the gun where you're going, okay, this is my distance, this is my problem, this is the pattern.
Maybe for shooting steel on a fun woods
Yeah,
walk at gun site.
yeah, you can shoot steel with that, right? You can also shoot steel with double aught buck, and you'll have a much better handle on it because you'll know what it does at that distance on that kind of target.
So yeah, when we're talking about versatility, we're talking about it can do a lot of cool stuff, not
Yeah.
different stuff you can stick in there.
No.
Double up buckshot and slugs. That's what works. And like you say, that the slug select drill, really not a thing that happens a whole lot.
No.
It's capable of doing that. And slugs can be good. You know, we always say 200 yards is what Oklahoma says. They can actually be effective farther than that, but do you really want to be loose in a slug at more than 200 yards or even 200 yards for that matter?
So then my question would be is how many people are shooting it out to that distance in training
And why?
or to where they understand it?
Yeah.
Realistically, a 1 ounce slug in the gun, if you don't know your sights very well, you 100 yards might be overly generous. Quite frankly, in a lot of cases, probably 50 is more reasonable.
Yeah, and we see that in training. That's where you're going out to 15-25 with a good buckshot,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going out to 50, maybe a little bit more with the slug. After that,
Yeah.
you're kind of running out of the shotgun area into a different area.
So you brought up kind of the different distances, and we used to really kind of hammer on three zones of engagement. And I don't necessarily hear it talked about as much anymore, but the A zone was originally 0 to 5 yards. And pretty much whatever you shot within that distance was going to hit like a single projectile, regardless of what it was going to hit as a
Yep.
single projectile. So you had to aim it. So unless you were in contact distance shooting from like an underarm assault position, or what my Saudi calls his high tuck, right? You had to actually get the sights up to eye level and use them. There's some ways to do some things in close that might be beyond the purview of this conversation. That A zone's now out to about 10 yards. Most of the stuff I have in decent barrel, I can make headshots with where everything is staying together at 10 yards in whatever the A zone is on the head, be it the down zero, be it a triangle, be it an oversized business card. Then you had the B zone, which was kind of from wherever the A zone ended to where your pattern spread got to the point that you couldn't guarantee it would stay on target, right? And that was where you had the benefit of the shotgun moving, low light, right? You were moving, didn't have a perfect sight picture. That spread made up for it. And then we got to where, okay, I got pellets now leaving the target. Now I need to go back to a solid projectile and aim that gun. I can remember, and that was the C zone. I can remember my first shotgun class down at Gunsight, Bill Jeans talking about we didn't know how accurate these things were until we put real sights on them. Not a bead, not a ramped bead where you had to do some weird holdovers and put the bead on the belt buckle to hit the guy,
Yep.
between the armpits, right? Um, but like once you put a decent set of ghost rings on or modified ghost rings or reliable, robust rifle sights. And now that we've gotten into optics, it's a completely different story because here's the dirty little secret: get an optic with a circle reticle in it because it just about mirrors the pattern at 20 to 25 yards of your buckshot and go to work.
It absolutely does.
Right.
It absolutely
That's the
does.
dirty little secret. Right. So, but, once we started putting decent sights on the guns, we got much better performance out of them. When we bought the 1400 short barreled guns for everybody, we got them with the scattergun ghost rings on. So everybody had a ghost ring that could be adjusted to them.
Yeah,
And
and that is something that's not a myth about shotguns. They do have their own personality, one gun to the next. And I mean,
yeah.
I would be willing to bet if I took two of them off the line side by side, they would have
Oh,
some differences.
yeah. I've taken guns like sequential serial numbers on the receivers and whatever barrel came with them and had significant differences. Right. And that was another one of the problems in the law enforcement world. Is that gun issued to you? Cool. You know what your gun does with your load. Is that gun issued to the car? What happens when your car goes in for maintenance?
Right.
Right? Do you get that gun back? Do you even know what the serial number on it is? What if it's the guns are issued to the shift? Graveyards gets these 10 shotguns and you get whatever you check out of the kit room that night. All
Yeah, I
right.
think a lot of big cities departments still do that. Man, folks, I tell you what, get your own shotgun. Shotguns are amazing tools,
Mm-hmm.
though they take a little bit more work and a little bit more training that we're putting into them. So if we put the work and the training into them, maybe another day instead of the one day,
Yeah.
maybe folks will have will understand how important those things are and how we really shouldn't lose those for rifles because rifles have their place for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but shotguns still have a place, and we're losing these amazingly effective tools to time, and I think it's a terrible thing.
There's the misunderstanding from the mythology, the misunderstanding from not having attended competently presented shotgun training. Those are the things that are hurting us, right? And again, I don't have the details on the Pennsylvania incident, but I know that after the investigation report came out on the officer that was killed in the hostage situation in the emergency room back there, Pennsylvania. Well, my understanding is Pennsylvania State Police pulled their shotguns and just went patrol rifles because of that. I got a bunch of questions. Had they patterned the guns? Did the copper have a gun that was his and he knew what the load was going to do? I've heard that multiple pellets missed the bad guy and hit the officer, Was that a shotgun problem or was that a shooter problem? Right. And like we talk a lot in the community about over penetration versus misses. Misses are our biggest trouble. We're not
Yep.
necessarily having projectiles exit out the back side of folks. Now, if you shoot them in the arm or peripheral of the leg, you have a higher increase of a round exiting. But a lot of our issues are straight up misses, right? That's not going to be changed by going to a different platform other than the amount of projectiles in the air, right? You're still going to have a projectile going down range that can cause great bodily injury or death. So I have a bunch of questions about it. I don't want to dump on the shooter, but I don't know the answers to the questions. So it's hard for me to get into a conversation about that state police decision without knowing more about it.
Well, and you know, and as well as I do, and I am an administrator, that sometimes we do what's easy rather
Mm-hmm.
than what's best, what's faster, what's more expedient than what's best. And I don't know anything about the decision either, but I know we don't want to be losing the shotgun because it's easier just to go with the rifle because it's not more effective in
Right.
every situation. It's better in a lot of situations, like you said, active shooter. Yeah, that's probably what I would go with too in a large area. But if I'm in a small area, especially with a vehicle problem, somebody in a vehicle, around a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
I know I can do a lot of cool stuff with that. I don't want to get into too much detail about bouncing rounds and
Yeah.
whatever, but if we, you know what we're doing, we've got this amazing tool.
Oh,
And
and on
so,
that, one other thing, if I can jump in,
yeah,
safeties. And I don't care if it's a patrol rifle or a shotgun. Learn how to manipulate the mechanical
yes,
safety on the gun. Make that part of the constant training and the qualification. So there's no excuse for that gun being on fire when it should be on safe when there's round into the chamber. And there's a regrettable incident out of California in the early OOs where there was an officer on a SWAT team who had his gun off safe. And ultimately, there's a couple different ways he may have gotten there, but ultimately he shot and killed a child who was prone out on the floor during a search warrant service because he had his gun off safe. Learn
yeah,
how to
that
safety.
boy, just general safety is something we're kind of losing too. We've had that conversation. I know you at least one podcast about it.
Yep.
Yeah, the safety doesn't come off until the finger can go on. When it comes to a shotgun or a rifle, and when it's time to take the safety off, it's time to bring it up. We don't run around with the safety off
Yeah.
with a chambered round with a 2 to 4 pound trigger in a
Yeah.
gun. We just don't do that. It's not wise. But
The,
that's
the
something that
thing,
again we gotta train for that.
yeah, the finger stays on the frame or the receiver until you've made the decision to shoot and the sights are coming on to target.
And that's when we can take the safety off. Those things go together. And well, kind of like in 1911, if it's we're at our ready position or
Yeah.
whatever, we come up to shoot. That's when the safety comes off. When we stop shooting, safety goes back on until
Yep.
you're ready to shoot some more. So yeah, and I think it's all more. I think we're still hitting that same topic. We just need more training with it, and I think people would
Mm-hmm.
be more comfortable. And that's what our bird shot is for. Our bird shot is for those manipulations when we need to go bang for training. That's when the bird shot works great, or for birds.
Yep.
But Erick Gelhaus again, I really appreciate you so much. So you're over there at our competition, American Cop,
Yes, sir.
doing some great work. But we cross post quite a bit,
Yep.
and Police One really doesn't really care about that kind of stuff. We care about getting good information out there, and I think we did. I think we did it.
So, also doing the teaching at cougarmountainsolutions.com. Fair amount of the stuff I work on is instructor development. So teaching agency instructors how to teach pistol mounted optics, how to teach low light, how to teach shotgun to their people, right? And that's cougarmountainsolutions.com. And whether it's officer.com, police one, American Cop, we talked about police marksman earlier, which unfortunately is like gone way away. I honestly believe everybody I've run into in the police writing field, their goal has been trying to put enough good information out so that we send everybody home at the end of the shift to their loved ones, or we gave them the skill set to do the best they could in an incredibly bad situation, and at least they acquitted themselves well.
That's exactly it. That is exactly it. Um, so you teach just to be clear, you teach red dot shotgun. You're a traveling guy, so
Yep.
nobody has to come see you. You're all over the place, and you can get that at cougarmountainsolutions.com.
CougarMountainSolutions.com.
And I actually sent one of our guys to Red Dot instructor because I'm aging out pretty, here to maybe 2, 3, 4 years, I'll be aging out, and I wanted somebody that is really competent. So sent one of our best guys out there, and he just raved about the Red Dot class. It's a really good class, and I'm about to make him put one on for us. I've taught a lot of the Red Dot classes, but that's only just based on stuff I've stolen from you and other places. So now we got an actual certified instructor. So, folks, if
He acquitted himself well.
he did acquit himself well, he did acquit himself very well, and we're looking over the material, and it's really good stuff. It's really top notch stuff. The Red Dot stuff, the shotgun stuff. It seems a little counterintuitive to have a same guy teaching the Red Dot, the new fancy thing, with good old fashioned shotgun, but there's a reason for that. Because if you put the work into either one of those, they're incredibly effective tools for law enforcement. So, but you can't just slap it on there and go. You can't just grab a shotgun out of the rack, throw some buckshot in there, and hope for the best, because it's probably not going to work out for you. So that's why we need our instructors, and we need to go to class and stuff. So anyway, Eric, man, I really appreciate you coming on. And to all the folks out there in Copland, don't lose a shotgun, guys.